we have our table locked, so we'll be able to tilt it. I want to go ahead and lock it and see if we can tilt it. So I'm just going to tilt it just a little bit. So in here we are 617, 6579. So now I'll be able to move this in and out just a little bit to make that adjustment. So the machine knows the position of the rib fence. It knows the position of compensation to your stops. So depending if you move it in and out, which will happen, more you tilt you're going to tilt, more degrees you're going to add to the table, that pin will actually move and expand the rib fence. So if I go the other way, make sure I'm not hitting it, and up again, and then I'll move this out of the way, move this. So if I go, I'll start noticing the table will start moving. So this actually is going to be the compensation for that movement. So we are at 135 or 44.8. So we have positive and you have the negative. So and then also you're going to have in and out of your measurement. So it's going to be depending which side you're running on. So this side here is going to be inside. Here it's going to be on the outside. So depending when you have the stops, that's how it's going to calculate and see the distance.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's go ahead and put it back. This little mechanism will work automatically when you get to the center. Let's see. There it is. And lock it into 90 degrees, and then push it back to the 0 position. Then we can lock it. So later on, when you have to calibrate your digital L, it's going to be correctly calibrated. So it's not going to be off by an inch or two, depending how much that's going to be. So now we have 3 stops. So we have stop number 1, that's going to be our main origin position. You're going to have stop number 2, that is set in the system. So the position number 2 only works if it's against our digital L. So the machine knows the distance from here to here is one amount. That amount has to be correct. So if you want to utilize 2 stops, start with 3 or 2, then finish with 1. So if we're going to have 65 and 24, we're going to go to position number 2. I'm going to go ahead and open up the fine tuning, so I have some movement available to me when I get to position. So we're going to go 65, we can eyeball it, lock it in, and then shrink it. Lock this in position. Now it's going to be important to highlight number 1, because if you don't highlight number 1, number 2 will move with you. So when I get number 1, number 2 is locked in position, so it's not going to move. I'm going to go to 24, lock it in, fine tune it. It's very precise. So now we have stop number 2 at 64.999. Stop number 1 is going to be at 24 inches. If you want to utilize number 1 and number 3, we're going to highlight number 3 stop. We're going to take our second stop, lock it into position for number 3. We're going to go underneath, loosen up our extension, go ahead and lock our number 3 position, which will go into this hole right here. Now we're going to utilize, we're going to go to 110 inches. Let's see, 110. I'm going to get really close, lock it in, it is, 110. So now we're going to lock our extension, unlock our position, change it to number 1. Now we can go to, for example, 56. So it's 56. So now you have 2 positions, number 3 at 110, number 1 from 6 inches all the way to 76 inches. We chose 56.
Awesome. Question for you, Thomas. Yes. On that initial calibration, when you brought it over to the measurement over here, I think it was 6 inches, and it was just a little over 6 inches, but it wasn't necessarily a calibration like you did with the blade and the rip fence.
Correct.
Is that, what would the procedure be for actually adjusting the calibration? So you did the battery, it starts over at that. Is this already calibrated like on a saw setup? Would this be very, very close, but maybe not precise?
In factory setup, they actually did this calibration in factory, so they know that this position should be as close to, let's see, 6 inches and 6.030. So that's going to be factory set. So there's going to be a factory parameter that's already pre-calculated. So the only thing you have to do is just make sure that your fine-tuning is locked in to the end, holding it here. That's going to give you the parameter, which I'll show you where the parameter is.
Okay.
But if, for any reason, because the factory presets it to a specific blade thickness, if you have something different, if you want to change this parameter, hold stop number 1. Will give you a calibration mode. So now you can change that number to match your new blade thickness.
So we could bring it down all the way back. I'll call it 0, lock it down, cut a piece, make it, come over here and do an adjustment.
Yes. So now you'll be able to move your decimal by pressing this icon here. That's going to move one decimal to the left. Then you have plus minus here that you can move the number up and down. When you finish with it, press this icon here. That's going to save that number. The only thing is, when you remove the battery and put it back in, that number will change back to the factory setup.
Because there's no like little CMOS battery in there or anything.
No.
The little memory battery. Okay.
So if you want to get to the menu, you'll be able to change millimeters or inches, English or German, or do incremental cut. So in here, you'll be able to cut parts. So you'll be able to go to, for example, this number here, press start, and then move it again to your next location. So do increments.
Oh, from the first cut to the next cut.
Correct.
I see.
Now it's very important to always, if you do remove the battery, don't reset it, don't put your new battery in here and then move it into this position, because that's going to go beyond negative. If you go too far, that can create a problem on the board or on the system. And there's only X amount of negative point that the machine will go beyond before it reaches that error mode, and then it will just kind of
I see.
Go into its, I would say, it's into standby mode, or in the mode where you're going to have numbers beyond 1,000 of a millimeters or even 1,000 of an inch. So always to the end, reset it. After resetting it, you're going to have your batteries. Let's see. So I'm going to take the battery one more time. So if I put the new battery in, it's always going to tell me to reset it first. Afterwards, the batteries will be blank for a few seconds. So there's communication right now. So it's handshake, indications. If the communication is okay, it will give you a battery from the flex. If the battery is empty, that means to replace the battery. So if I remove the battery here, it should go blank in a few seconds. If I put it back in, it will tell me to reset it. Depending on the time, If the time is long enough, this actually will tell you to reset it again. So after resetting it, it's going to reconnect. It's going to give you the battery.
All right, so you want anybody with any Altendorf questions, just call you directly?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else here on the saw you'd like to cover?
I think that's going to be it.
Maybe like that tip you had on that battery, pushing all the way down to the end. I got to admit, I probably did put a battery in when the digit scale was in the middle. Anything else like on the saw or usage? What about the angle for the miter, whether it being on the top or the bottom of the cut from the fence?
Sure. So if we go to our measurement, so if we go to 45 degrees, press start. This drive, or this controller, Pro Drive, would always measure from the bottom of the cut. This is an entry-level controller. If you go to the next level, it's going to be Evo and then Elmo. When you start tilting, the controller will give you option. Do you want to go from the top or the bottom of the cut?
I see. Okay.
On this one here, it's always going to be reading from the bottom.
I see. So someone looking at the different levels of the computers for Altendorf, that'll be good for them to understand, not just compound cuts and miters, but just doing regular angle cuts here on the saw. That's something you get with the next level computer.
Correct.
Okay.
The next level will actually ask you the thickness of the material. That thickness would then correspond to the parameter that the machine will give you in the end, depending if you're cutting top or the bottom. Let's see. So the bottom cut is going to be offset in your digit L. So if we come over here, if you go to 16 inches, you just want to add 0.012 to your final cut to correspond to that tilt.
I see. I see.
So if we press back, that's going to take us to 0. All green, you're good to go.
Awesome.
Now, sometimes, and let me go back to rip fence. Sometimes the rip fence adjustment needs the sensor. So the rip fence, it's got a sensor to know its location. So if you're cutting in shorter or longer way, the machine will recognize the position of it. You lock it in, the red number meaning now you have a new position, such that press start for it to respond to the new position. So the machine knows its location using the sensor, just right here. Sometimes that sensor might be too sensitive or not adjusted correctly. So I had before, so let me go back here. Now if I forget to lock this in, I'll leave it in, depending where the position is. If I move it closer, let's see, there it is.
Yeah, when you locked it down, it knew, yeah.
So now it's going to be locked in and then come out. I had a few times that was not adjusted, somebody forgot about it. Sometimes the machine will kind of go back and forth and try to hunt this number because of that movement. So make sure it's locked in position, that the sensor can utilize and see that rip fence position. Press start. So while you shake it, you always lift this up and then check if this light is on. Sometimes you can wiggle it if you're noticing it's coming on and off. So if it's in this position and it's off, that means the sensor adjustment is off. You loosen up this nut here and you can go in and out to adjust it. I think as of right now there's a 0.01 or 0.02 of a millimeter spacing. So you can always take a filler and check in.
Awesome, Thomas. Well, thanks for making it out. Appreciate it. Thanks for the service on the saw.
Thank you.